How can something as simple as breathing influence something as complex as the nervous system? And what if yoga's most important effect has nothing to do with flexibility? Ancient practitioners described it through experience. Modern scientists describe it through physiology. Different language. The same questions. Why does the state of the breath influence the state of the mind? Why does the state of the body influence the state of the mind? And what exactly happens inside us when we practice yoga? Today, neuroscience allows us to explore those questions from a different direction. Not whether yoga works, but how. For thousands of years, yoga was described using the language available at the time: breath, balance, attention, stillness. Ancient practitioners did not know about cortisol. They did not know about heart rate variability. They did not know about the vagus nerve, inflammatory pathways, or autonomic regulation. Yet they repeatedly returned to a remarkably consistent observation. The state of the breath influences the state of the mind. The state of the body influences the state of the mind. Today, neuroscience allows us to revisit that observation from a different direction. Not whether it works, but why it works. Because beneath every thought, emotion, and behavior sits a regulatory system that is constantly making one fundamental decision: am I safe or am I not? Every second, every minute, every day, long before conscious awareness arrives, the nervous system is already scanning, predicting, adjusting, and allocating resources. Heart rate changes, breathing changes, blood pressure changes, muscle tension changes. You experience the output as a feeling. The nervous system experiences it as regulation. And yoga, perhaps more than any other widely practiced activity, provides a direct way of interacting with that machinery. Most people imagine the nervous system as electrical wiring, a network carrying signals from one location to another. But a more useful image may be a dynamic river system, thousands of channels continuously adjusting flow, accelerating here, slowing there, redirecting resources toward whatever the body believes matters most. When threat is detected, the flow changes, heart rate rises, breathing accelerates, attention narrows, muscles prepare for action. This is sympathetic activation, not a malfunction, not anxiety, not weakness, a survival technology, refined over millions of years. The challenge is not turning it on, the challenge is turning it off. Most organs operate beyond conscious control. You cannot directly lower your blood pressure. You cannot consciously reduce cortisol production. You cannot manually regulate immune signaling. Breathing is different. Breathing is automatic, yet accessible. The body breathes without you, and still, you can reach in and change it. That makes breathing one of the rare conscious entry points into an otherwise unconscious system. A doorway, not merely into the lungs, into regulation itself. As exhalation lengthens, receptors in the carotid arteries detect subtle shifts in pressure. Signals travel through autonomic pathways that converge on regulatory centers in the brainstem, including pathways involving the vagus nerve. The nervous system receives new information, not words, not beliefs, not positive thinking. Information. Conditions appear stable. Demand appears lower. Mobilization may no longer be necessary. And the system begins to shift, not because it was instructed to relax, but because incoming evidence suggests that it can. This pathway has been studied with unusual consistency. Slow breathing, changes in autonomic activity, measurable effects on heart rhythm and heart rate variability. While the magnitude varies across studies, the overall pattern has remained remarkably consistent. Stress itself is not the problem. Life requires stress. Growth requires stress. Learning requires stress. Parenting requires stress. Work requires stress. Even exercise requires stress. The nervous system was never designed to eliminate challenge. It was designed to adapt to it. The problem arises when adaptation becomes continuous. Imagine a city whose emergency systems remain activated long after the emergency has ended. Resources continue to be redirected. Fuel continues to be consumed. Maintenance is postponed. Repairs are delayed. For a while, the city continues functioning, but the cost accumulates. Biologists call this allostatic load, the wear and tear produced by chronic adaptation. Not one major event, thousands of small adjustments repeated across months and years. Persistent vigilance, repeated activation, incomplete recovery. The body continues paying for demands that may no longer be present. Sleep becomes less restorative. Muscles remain tense. Energy becomes harder to replenish. Recovery takes longer. The system still works, but it works less efficiently. The issue is not that the nervous system adapts. The issue is the biological price of adapting without sufficient opportunity for restoration. Yoga's relationship to that price has been studied directly. Meta-analytic research, combining dozens of randomized controlled trials, has found yoga practice associated with reductions in cortisol and other markers of stress physiology, a pattern observed repeatedly across many investigations, which raises an important possibility. Perhaps the most important effect of yoga is not that it removes stress. Perhaps it helps reduce the biological cost of adapting to it. Recovery, however, is only part of the story. A healthy nervous system is not one that avoids challenge. It is one that responds to challenge efficiently. Imagine two bridges exposed to the same wind. The rigid bridge transfers every force directly into its structure. Stress accumulates. Fatigue develops. Small oscillations become larger ones. The flexible bridge behaves differently. It absorbs force, redistributes force, adapts to force, and returns to stability with less structural cost. The difference is not exposure. The difference is capacity. Human physiology works in much the same way. Every day, the nervous system encounters demands, deadlines, conflict, uncertainty, physical exertion, emotional strain, future prediction. The question is not whether these demands occur. The question is how much physiological effort is required to manage them. The same logic appears to extend to thought itself. Brain imaging studies of meditative and breath-focused practices, including elements incorporated into yoga, have found reduced activity in networks associated with self-referential thinking and rumination. Less activity there has been associated with less repetitive self-focused thinking. One possible explanation for why many practitioners describe a quieter relationship with their thoughts. Not fewer thoughts, a different relationship with them. This is where long-term yoga practice becomes particularly interesting. The emerging evidence suggests that yoga may not simply help people recover from stress, it may improve the efficiency of the systems responding to stress. Activation when necessary, recovery when possible, adaptation with less biological cost. In other words, the goal is not a life without load. The goal is a system with greater capacity. In physiology, Resilience is not resistance to change. It is the ability to adapt without excessive cost. Two individuals may encounter the same challenge. One becomes exhausted. The other remains relatively stable. Not because the challenge was smaller, but because the adaptive system responding to it was different. From the outside, yoga appears to be movement, postures, balance, flexibility. But beneath the visible layer, another process is unfolding: attention, breath, regulation, state change. Again and again and again. Each practice session becomes a small physiological rehearsal, a repeated opportunity for the nervous system to experience effort without emergency, challenge without threat, activation without alarm. Over time, those repetitions accumulate, not as a single dramatic transformation, but as thousands of small adjustments. The kind biology understands best. This is also why yoga has begun appearing in clinical research, not only wellness content. Studies examining yoga as an adjunct intervention for trauma-related symptoms suggest effects on stress physiology, including changes involving cortisol regulation, inflammation, and other biological systems associated with chronic stress. Not a replacement for treatment, a tool that may work alongside it. Perhaps that is why yoga has persisted across centuries. Not because ancient practitioners understood modern neuroscience, but because they repeatedly observed something real. The body influences the mind, the breath influences the body, and the quality of regulation influences both. Today we can describe the mechanisms more precisely. Autonomic regulation, vagal pathways, stress physiology, allostatic load, adaptive capacity, different language, the same observation, what ancient practitioners described phenomenologically. Modern neuroscience increasingly studies mechanistically, so perhaps the most important question on Yoga Day is not whether you can touch your toes, not whether you can hold a posture, not whether you can perform an impressive pose. The more important question is this: how efficiently can your nervous system move between challenge and recovery? Because resilience is not the absence of stress, it is the capacity to adapt, and yoga may be one of the oldest practices humanity has developed for repeatedly exercising that capacity. Not by escaping physiology, but by working with it.